Good morning, or I guess good afternoon. It's 12:35. I'd like to call the meeting to order. As always, when starting our meetings, I would like to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Just before we start, I'm just going to do a sound check to make sure that we can hear each of the commissioners on the line. Carol?
Hello, I'm here.
Great. Lisa?
Good afternoon, everybody.
Great. Tony Mancini?
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Monday.
Great. Lindell?
Here and accounted for.
Great. And Tony Thomas?
I'm here.
Great. And we did get regrets from Carlos. He's not able to attend today. So first item on the agenda is the community announcements. Are there any community announcements from anyone for today's meeting?
I have one. Carol here. So I just wanted to bring your attention to an event on Saturday, August 29th from 12 to 5 on Cottagen Street. It's a Black business takeover. This is the second time this has happened. It also was, I believe it was the end of July, but dates, you know, they wander in your brain now. But there'll be art and clothing and jewelry and cosmetics and food and more for sale that day. And I have to tell you that I bought the best mask in the world at that event. And I just want you to know that this one fits. It never creeps. It's absolutely amazing. And it's by a company called Trev. So why not head out and support some Black businesses? Thank you.
Any other community announcements? No, hearing none. Next up is the approval of the minutes from July 20th. Would ask if there's someone can make a motion to approve the minutes from July 20th.
I so move. Lisa?
Great.
Second, Smith.
Moved by Lisa and seconded by Lindell. Any discussion, corrections, changes to the minutes? No, great. I'll call the question then. All those in favor of approving the minutes, just raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? Any abstaining? No, great. The motion is passed. Thank you. So next up is the approval of the order of business and the approval of any additions and deletions. Just checking in. I know there was some discussion about, actually, I'll just poll the commissioners and go through. Carol?
No, I don't have any additions.
Right. Lisa?
No additions or deletions from my end.
Right. Tony Mancini?
Nothing from me, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Lindell?
Yes, I'd like to add, and I can't find the email, but the last meeting deferred item, that was the independent opinion on legal counsel for Board of Police Commissioners. I forget the number item that it was. I don't have it up right now, but just to add that back with members of the commission.
Okay. So we have a bit of a procedural issue around that on two fronts. Number one, this being a special meeting, and also just sort of where the discussion will go. So Marty, I'll ask you to correct me if I'm wrong, but any added items do require unanimous approval from all members of the board, regardless of whether they're here or not. But we do have the option of suspending that rule with a 2/3 vote from the people in attendance. Correct, Marty?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. So where we don't have everybody here with Carlos absent, we don't have unanimous approval. So do I need a motion, Marty, to to suspend that rule, or can we just vote on it?
No, you need, well, you need a motion and then you will need a vote on it.
Okay.
2/3 vote to add it to the, to add it as a added item. There are actually two procedural things here.
Yeah.
And whether you want to deal with it now or simply deal with it with under added items, for example, one of them is to add it to the special meeting. That requires 2/3 vote. And then the second thing is that the item is currently deferred under Rule 17. So because of that, you will need, if the board decides they want to deal with it, right, you'll need another 2/3 vote in order to suspend Rule 17. So
Yeah.
you're going to need 2 votes to effectively deal with it. And the question is, do you want to deal with one of them now and the other once you get to added items, or do you want to deal with them both at the time of added items?
I wanted to deal with just the one at a time, because I don't think we want to have the debate at this point in time. I think we want to move the debate under items from the Board of Police Commissioners rather than do it here. So I will need a motion to waive the rule requiring the addition of the unanimous approval of all board members to add an item on a special meeting.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So with this item, it was decided at the last meeting to defer it alongside Commissioner Blackburn's item, but it didn't make it on the agenda for whatever reason.
Lisa's item was deferred due to time, Lindell.
Yeah, mine
This
was too. It was the
item,
same.
yeah.
It was
No,
the
no,
same thing.
yours is also deferred because once the motion is made, it is considered deferred until there is a staff report and recommendations on it. So that's what's in progress of being done now. When that staff report and recommendations are completed, that's when it would come back to the board for debate and discussion.
We never voted as a commission to even pass that for staff report initially. So that's where I'm confused at, because we didn't even have that item on the agenda for us as a commission to agree we wanted a staff report.
So that comes with a notice of motion, does it not, Marty? I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. When a member adds something, right? Adds something to the agenda, right? And then it calls for, in order for the board to deal with it, Rule 17 requires a staff report and recommendation, unless there was a companion motion at the same time to suspend that rule, right? And then just by operation, the board doesn't do anything. The rule actually says it is automatically deferred until the report and the recommendation come back. Does that help?
I'm still, so when how is this motion different from Commissioner Blackburn's, in the sense it was a member of the commission? We added it as any other notice of motion. So if a staff report is being written, I'm not against it, but my question is, I don't remember us as a commission voting to support that. I don't even remember reading that motion on the record other than to add it as notice of motion. So I just, the process is where I'm a little confused on. We haven't had a discussion as the commission of that motion other than to add it as a motion for future meetings. So that's where I'm confused. I just don't know when we decided.
Okay, but I think, I'd have to go back and check again, but I think beyond just simply you giving notice of motion, right? I think that the motion was agreed. It was agreed to add it to the agenda at some point, right?
So it was, and then we deferred it because you ran out of time.
That's right, but the effect is the same thing. You can't, the motion by that rule is deemed to be deferred. You have to have a report and a recommendation under that rule to even deal with it, unless you suspend that rule.
Yeah. So maybe just for clarity's sake, I think this is the challenge that we run into when we're not having discussion, I think, ahead of time. When things are brought up at the last minute, it makes it hard with, the backing and forthing in a short timeline. As I understand it, the staff report is underway and the work is happening on that. And the intent is that we would bring that back and have a full discussion on this issue at that point in time. So I'm just wondering if that's acceptable as we go forward.
So again, I'm happy if the work is being done, because that's what we want to do. It's just the procedure seems a little different to me in the sense of I don't remember us as a commission having a discussion on that item in particular, and I know that is what we usually do, and then flesh it out, have a discussion. If there's any changes to the motion, blah blah blah. So that I don't remember that happening. But if the report's being written, I guess we'll have a further discussion when it comes back. But my only thing was just how we got here, and I want to make sure we didn't miss a step.
Okay, so why don't we go back, Marty, and clarify sort of what the previous discussion was, and if there's any procedural issues, then we can identify them at that point in time.
Right. The only other thing I would add is that I've had correspondence with Lindell, right, where we were planning rather than just jump in, right, and basically to have a discussion to hone that report. So we're addressing exactly what the issue is. And apparently there was some confusion by Lindell's assistant. Lindell had suggested we have a call. We were going to have that call, but it didn't get set up. And I think the plan now is to have that call. And so we can discuss that and make sure we want the report to specifically address the concerns here. So if that's still a possibility, we can have that call and then we'll know where we're headed with it.
Right. And what we'll do is,
Lindell, can we do that?
For me. Yep.
Yeah. So Robin, if we can, or sorry, whoever's doing the note of the minutes, let's just make a note that will be brought back to the next meeting under business arising out of the minutes for clarification on the process and just to look back at the history of what had happened when Lindell had provided the notice of motion. Because if there is a procedural issue there, we want to make sure that it's well documented so that we can address it and avoid it happening in future. But again, I would just remind the commissioners, this is why we have to have discussion ahead of time, not the day of the meeting or the day before. It really does help us to have a little bit of time to make sure that these issues are ironed out so we don't end up having to discuss them in the meeting. We've got a plan to go forward. Great. So item number 5 is business arising out of the minutes. There are 2 items. Number 1 has to do with the Wortley report recommendations and the extension to Dr. Scott Wortley for data access. I know Dan had talked about there was agreement in principle that this was going to happen. Just wondering, Dan, if there's an update on where we are with that extension.
Good afternoon, everyone, and through you, Chair. No, the extension has been formalized. MOU has been signed. We heard back from Dr. Wortley, and he's continuing on with his research.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions for Dan on that? No, great. The other item that I had was there was some discussion at the last meeting about extending the deadline for citizens to submit FOIPOP or ATIP requests for access to their own street check data. We had talked about there being, with COVID-19, perhaps interrupting a number of things that we may want to consider extending that deadline versus what was in I believe it was in the Wortley recommendations. So just wanted to, members of the public have until the end of the year to request their data. So is there a desire to extend that date given COVID-19? And I'll start with Carol.
Thank you. It makes a lot of sense to me that these deadlines agree. I think it's really important that we don't send a mixed message to the community about that. And so I would suggest that we do extend so that the agreement time is the same for both.
Lisa?
Yeah, I'm just concerned that we've only had the one person step forward to request the information. So to me, that sort of indicates that you know, I think we might have a communications problem, and so extending the deadline, I think, would be a good idea if it's paired up with a robust campaign to get the message out there. So I certainly would be in favor of extending that deadline for COVID-19 purposes. Absolutely.
Thank you, Lisa. Tony Mancini?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm fine with extending the deadline.
Great, thank you. Lindell?
Thank you. So I agree as well that we should extend the deadline. I'm in a little bit of a different place though. I think what we should do, understanding that we've had the data available for maybe 8-9 months. I'm not sure exactly how long. I'm not sure if anyone here can answer that question, but how long have we had the data available for access at this point? Is it 8 months?
Dan? I think it's always been available, hasn't it?
Yeah, so through you, Chair, and to the Commissioner, you'll recall that this idea of the timeline came from the board last June.
Right.
And
okay, yes.
very shortly after that, the data was made available. So the data's been available for just over a year now and continues to be available. So I'm happy to answer any other questions or wait till everyone's had an opportunity to comment.
No, that's great, because so the aspect of, as you're right, it was always available if it was requested. But looking at the Wortley report, there was a different timeline, made it free, et cetera, et cetera. So my question or my concern now is, it's been available for a little over a year, almost a year, and we've seen that only one person has come forward. I would rather us, before we put another deadline, it does come up with a communication strategy of how we're going to engage folks to access that data, and then put a timeline on it. And only reason I say that is because we got a letter either today or yesterday from DPAD, who expresses the same same concern of not having the proper engagement for the folks who've been most impacted by the data. So for me, I don't mind us going with the extension, but I think we should hold off on giving a date until we have a communications plan that's approved by the commission, that also has been worked with folks who have been stakeholders in this, because again, we don't want to do it just to check mark the Wortley report box, but also making sure that we're approaching it in a way. So I don't know how other folks feel, and I'll wait to see what other commissioners think. But I really think before we put another date, understanding that we didn't have the uptake that we were hoping, we should have some kind of plan moving forward before putting another hard stop on the access. But I'll come back and we can discuss that further if other folks are interested. But that's my feeling.
Great, thanks, Lindell. Tony Thomas?
Yeah, I agree with what Lindell is saying. Also, I think extending the timeline, I think, is important. So I totally agree with the extension of the deadline at this time.
So what we'll do is we'll take that away, look at, sort of document what we've done so far, and then have a discussion with commissioners sort of about the plan and the next steps. Is there somebody that would be willing to take that on as an action item in terms of looking specifically at those next steps and putting that plan together?
So I'll raise my hand. Sorry to interrupt. So me and Carol last week chatted with the chief around our working group.
Yeah.
Or working group. Is it working group? gosh, my brain's not working today. It's Monday. Well, my items, but Carol is part of one of them, and also Tony. Sorry for not bringing you in because I thought Carol was on both of them, but she's only on one. So next time we have a discussion, I make sure I bring you in, Tony. So we can add it to whatever category for me because it is in under communications, and both mine are communications related. So whatever category it fits under, I'll take that as part of my work plan, and we'll go forward from there. And if you want, commission, maybe for next meeting, because we're going to have an update on what we've talked about for next meeting already. Maybe at that meeting as well, we can talk about what that looks like, just so we can not keep this going on forever. So that could be an action item for next meeting, is to update on the working plan, but also what the extension of data might, or extension of the street tech data communications plan might look like. I'm not sure, just trying to figure out that.
No, that sounds good, Lindell. So we'll get some of that history to you so that you have that, and then we'll leave it up to you with the work plan update next meeting anyway. But we'll leave it up to you with the timing, whether to bring it back, when to bring it back to the board, and what else you need from us going forward.
All right, good.
Thank you.
Just Lindell for this, on this point. I'm happy to work with you on this, and so please call on me if you.
We can't make Carol out, Madam Chair. So we can't make Carol out.
Yeah, we didn't catch that, Carol. You're garbled a bit there.
Sorry, I just said that I'd be happy to work with Lindell on this, and so was asking if he could call on me if he needs any help, or if he finds that I can play a role there as well.
Great, thank you, Carol.
Was that clear?
Yes, it was. Great, so the next item on the agenda is call for declarations of conflicts of interests. Do you have any conflicts of interest for the items on today's meeting? Seeing none, that's great, moving right along. So consideration of deferred business. So the one other item that was deferred was the motion on the committee to define defunding the police. And that is actually on the agenda under the members of the BOPC. So that will be discussed there. And Lisa, your motion is there as well. This one was, quote, officially deferred by motion, whereas yours was deferred by time, but both of them are on the agenda. Great, so next up is correspondence, petitions, delegations. Robin, is there anything to report there?
Hi, Ms. Chair. We have some general correspondence that has been received by the clerk's office and has been circulated to the board. We have no petitions as far as I am aware, and we have a presentation by Martha Painter with the Women's Wellness within Nova Scotia.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So on to 8.3.1. Martha, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So I'll just do a brief introduction, Martha, if you don't mind.
Perfect.
Martha Painter is with the Women's Wellness within Nova Scotia. She's a registered nurse and actually a doctoral candidate in nursing at Dalhousie University. So she's actually the founder and the coordinator of Women's Wellness Within, which is a nonprofit organization which supports criminalized women and transgender non-binary individuals in the perinatal period in carceral institutions and the community. She certainly has lots of work being done to advance reproductive justice through advocacy, collaboration, and nursing scholarship. So welcome. And just before I turn it over, just a reminder from a procedure perspective, we do allow 10 minutes for presentations. And then after the presentation, we will entertain any questions from the board. So over to you, Martha, and thank you so much for your patience as we worked out our technical issues. And again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and speak with us.
Thank you. Let me know if you have any issues hearing me, okay? So we wanted to present on the application of a gender lens to arrest in light of the very public experiences of arrest of women and children over the winter, the violent arrest of Santina Rao in January and the violent arrest of the child in Bedford later in the winter, prompted us to want to speak with the Board of Commissioners about the need for gendered considerations in the arrest process. The Halifax Regional Police continues to refuse to share policies that govern arrest and use of force with the public. And from our knowledge, in speaking with the police about this, going back to at least 2016, we are not aware of any policies that specifically cover interactions with family, with children, and a lens that is cognizant of gendered impact of the experience of arrest. So in our work, we bring to this the governing principle that gender is referring to roles and behaviors that society considers appropriate for girls and boys, women and men, and gender interacts with but is not biological sex. So we use that World Health Organization definition. And also the United Nations rules for the treatment of women prisoners, which are commonly referred to as the Bangkok Rules. So 2010, they were ratified international laws that recognize that women, as well as gender diverse people, have different life experiences and require different approaches for fairness. And we also bring in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which govern children's rights internationally and stipulate that the best interests of children must be taken into consideration in all policy domains that affect children. So we have 5 principles to our concern about how arrest differently impacts women and gender diverse people. And the first is that most women have experienced sexual harassment, physical abuse, rape, and other types of gendered violence. And so when they are faced with the experience of arrest, that dominating and threatening approach is re-traumatizing. And we can anticipate very clearly that this will cause panic, it will cause fight or flight. And when we see people charged with then resisting arrest, it demonstrates how little understanding there is for the terror in women's minds. So we want to first state that interpreting resistance as anything other than predictable and protective response is simply wrong. The second element of our platform is how important it is that children be protected from the trauma of seeing their mothers arrested. Their parents, but we know that women do the bulk of all child care and child rearing. Do not arrest mothers in front of their kids. Again, mothers are even more likely to resist when this is happening in front of their children, and this is extremely traumatizing for children. The third element is, as is stipulated in the Bangkok rules, women who are to be detained must have the opportunity to arrange childcare for their children before they are separated. And if that is impossible, they have the possibility of a reasonable suspension of detention and not to be taken into custody. So that's the second rule in the 70 rules in the Bangkok Rule Platform. And it really cannot be stressed enough how terrifying it is for children, and also the long-term implications of even a brief separation of the child from her mother and placed into the protection of child protection services can have sequelae that last for years in terms of the impact on that family and that family's cohesion. The fourth element is that no breastfeeding mother pregnant person or sole caregiver for a child should be held in lockup, period. Incarceration, even briefly, is associated with serious harm for pregnant people, for fetal development and well-being, and for young children and neonates. Several countries around the world have worked to limit or eliminate the locking up of pregnant people and mothers of young children. This was one of the things that I brought to the Halifax Regional Police 4 years ago in response to the Lillian Desjardins case. I'm not sure if the board remembers this, but in February 2016, Lillian Desjardins was taken to lockup after a domestic violence incident, separated from her newborn baby. He was only a couple of months old. She was exclusively breastfeeding. She was held in lockup for 3 days without access to her baby. I'm not sure how the baby survived without food for 3 days. She became very sick with mastitis, leaking green fluid from her breasts, incredible pain from engorgement. And there was quite a lot of publicity about how the Saskatoon police mishandled her arrest and her detention, that ultimately resulted in the chief of police there, Clive Weigel, having to apologize and recognize publicly how much that police force had dropped the ball on this. I quote, "That was 4 years ago, and at the time they claimed ignorance and a lack of understanding of how the separation of a breastfeeding mother from their child could so severely impact the health of both." I've been talking with Halifax Police about this for 4 years, so there's no more possibility of claiming ignorance. And yet there is still no policy governing this one piece of all of the many layers of and intersecting layers of impact that gender and other sources of oppression have on the experience of arrest. And the final piece in our platform is to not be charging a person with violation of bail when they have experienced gender violence. We know the research is very clear that over 85% of women in detention have experienced gendered abuse, trauma at the hands of men, including police. And what we see is that when people are released, when women are released, they are more likely to engage in survival crime and so-called bail violations to get by, because women are more likely to experience poverty. They are more likely to need to provide for and care for children. And they have very unique gendered experiences of substance use disorder. Their arrest for survival crime and bail violations continues cycles of family separation, social exclusion, and oppression. Arrest has an impact on the entire family. And family is the gendered domain for women and mothers most often to deal with. Family members of incarcerated people experience layers of social and economic harm and psychological and emotional harm. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child guarantees the child's right to health and protection from punishment on the basis of the activities of their parents. The latter is Article 2, right? These are very front and center provisions in these UN sets of laws. So we have to return, when we are developing policy and when we are amending policy, to this principle that children have the right to their parents, and that the actions we make, state actions, must be made in the best interests of children. We are asking for the commissioners to respond through public engagement and transparent policy change. How will you ensure the police address arrest in a way that does not perpetuate gender discrimination and harm? How will you support us in our call for policy transparency and gender equity in police policy? And how will you hold HRP to account for tangible updates on progress towards these changes? Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Martha. That was very, very interesting and certainly very timely in light of recent events. I'll just poll the commissioners to see if there are any questions at this point in time. Carol? You can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down as well.
Yes, I have a couple of questions.
I don't hear Carol very well.
Sorry. I guess this is a question for AP as well, but have we ever, to your knowledge, Chief Kinsella, looked at policies with a view to the issues that Martha is raising?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair, and through you, Chair. We have, and I know there's going to be further dialogue on policies a little bit later in the agenda, so I'll comment some more then. But we have met with Ms. Painter, and we thank her for her presentation today. There's lots of information there, so we have and we will continue, and there is work to be done for sure, and we'll continue to do that.
My second question is really for Martha. It's just, I'm wondering if there are Canadian jurisdictions that have adopted the recommendations that you're bringing to us today. Are there any models that we can look to for some sort of guidance or any, precedents that have been established? Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. We conducted a recent environmental scan and were unable to find any examples across the country of, for instance, the breastfeeding policy that we're calling for first and foremost. However, and I'm not able to speak on this, I have been involved as a consultant in a confidential capacity with other police jurisdictions in the development of policies. Now, so we're sort of in this circular vortex where we can't comment on policies because the policies are withheld from the public. But of course, these are public services and are in theory serving the public. And without access to the policies, we can't comment on to what extent there is this cognition of gender and all these other layers of oppression that we see in intersectional analysis. Now, that said, Carol, the federal government has loudly sponsored what they call SGBA+, so sex and gender-based analysis that is cognizant of these intersectionalities, and the most obvious being racism. And so there are tools available at many different levels of government, and an expectation from at least the federal government that policy development will use those tools and have this lens.
Anything else, Carol? Okay, Lisa?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. And Carol actually asked my question about any other Canadian jurisdictions.
Yeah.
But Martha, thank you very, very much. So I guess sort of broadening the scope a bit, if we're not aware of any in Canada, do we know of any European models that have done this? Any police jurisdictions outside of North America that have done this? And my other point that I wanted to make as well is that going on right now as we're having our meeting is the inaugural Women's Advisory Committee. They're having a getting to know you session. That committee was just approved just this past spring, and this is exactly what this Women's Advisory Committee is going to be doing, putting this type of lens on all of the work that we do, whether it be police, planning, parks and rec. And Martha, I really think that that you should get in touch with the clerk's office and ask to make this presentation to the Women's Advisory Committee, because this is definitely the lens that we are looking to put on many of the things that we do. And so, yeah, Martha, if you had an answer to the jurisdictions outside of North America, that would be fabulous. Thank you.
There are many jurisdictions internationally that have looked at the issue of detention. And so when a charge has to be made to insist on keeping the mother in the home rather than bringing them into lockup, there's a collation of these that was produced by the Law Library of Congress, I'm going to say 2014, so it's a bit out of date, but I can certainly send that to you.
Thanks, Lisa. Tony Mancini?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Martha, thank you very much for the presentation. It was very informative. I learned a lot. I can't imagine what these women, the trauma they feel if they're being arrested or being detained. And again, being a male, didn't realize, of course, there's a trauma to the family and their children too. So thank you very much. Commissioner McDougall did ask the chief about where they are in their conversation. I'm curious. I didn't hear from the chief superintendent of the RCMP. Have they had conversation around this topic? I wonder if the chief superintendent can respond to that.
Good afternoon, everybody. And through you, Chair. As a federal entity, we have GBA Plus. We've been using that lens or that policy for several years now. When it comes to arrest procedures, like every policy, it has to go through the GBA Plus specifically. I'd have to check into that, but for at least 5 years, the federal government has been using GBA Plus, and that includes training for all of our members.
Good. Thank you for that, Chief Superintendent. And I guess, Martha, you alluded to the fact not being able to know what the policies are or seeing the policies. I think it's timely that the Commissioner Blackburn's motion is going to be discussed later on, and hopefully that'll help.
Very much.
Yeah, hopefully that'll help. So tip the hat to Commissioner Blackburn. Thank you again, Martha, for your presentation. Again, very informative.
Thank you, Councillor Mancini.
Thank you. Lindell?
Thanks. And again, Martha, thank you for the presentation. The main question I had was around other jurisdiction, which you answered. So to follow up with that, with your answer, do you have, and maybe you can't speak on it, but do you have an idea of timelines of when you think or possibly that information would be available for the public to see? Because as you said, to be okay.
I mean, Councillor Smith, this issue of the breastfeeding policy. So I've been meeting with HRP about the breastfeeding policy specifically since 2016. You know, here in the city, we're governed by what was then Capital District Health Authority breastfeeding policies. The Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission supports breastfeeding in all places. And so we have these conflicting policies, right? You have the right to breastfeed anywhere in the entire city, in the entire province, and yet you obviously can't bring a minor into cells with you, nor would that ever be hygienic. Right. You can't bring your own personal belongings. So you can't even have a pump. You're denied privacy, so you'd have to expose your breasts to the staff in cells. It's contradictory. It won't work. So we need to have solutions that prevent women who are breastfeeding from being in lockup. And this one policy, of which there are a million breastfeeding policies to look at to support how we move forward, there's still no clarity, and it's been 4 years. So while Chief Kinsella says, we've met, and we did, we met in March prior to COVID, and at that point I was told the breastfeeding policy is minutes away. I recognize that COVID happened, but I've been told that many times. and I will keep coming back, but I'm concerned that this continues to be a low priority issue when it is the entire world for a woman, a mother who's being arrested.
Right. So really quickly then, so obviously you're speaking specifically around the breastfeeding policy, but when looking at the overarching policies and some of the ones that you mentioned in the Bangkok, do you know if discussions have happened around the lens, the gender lens, and the other policies with HRP, since you've been advocating this for many years?
No, we thought we would start there.
Okay, gotcha.
No, I mean, Canada ratified the Bangkok rules 10 years ago, so this does apply to us. There's a lack of enforcement mechanisms, of course, but it applies right now.
Right. So, okay, thank you. I appreciate this. My follow-up will be with the chief then, and he already answered it a little bit, but I'm wondering overarching policies, if any, that deal with gender, and that could be if somebody gets arrested, they have the right to ask for somebody within the same gender or if possible available. I'm just wondering, is that another meeting, or is that something the chief can talk about today, just what we have in current practice when it comes to well, I'll speak to women in particular, or transgender folks who
I
recognize.
do want to be clear that it's not the issue of whether or not the arresting officer is a man.
No, sorry, that was just a general example. I'm just wondering what policies we have in place specifically that just deal with that. I just use that as an example.
Okay, yeah. Again, we've FOI popped. You know, Zane Woodford and my colleague Carrie Critchley did a FOI pop. We're not getting any of these policies. So perhaps if Councillor Blackburn's motion is successful, we will see them. So we'll see. I think it depends on that transparency that we haven't had yet.
Right. So Chief, do you have any response to that?
Thanks, Commissioner, for the question, and through you, Chair. We, look at the family and the gender lens as being very critical to any conversation. It's very critical also to policy development. We have addressed the breastfeeding policy piece. We also have, to your question, policies in place to deal with individuals who present as particular genders, so we can deal appropriately and ensure that should they find themselves in a prisoner care facility, they're treated with the utmost respect and dignity. So we do that, and as I mentioned earlier, is there more work to be done? Certainly. We'll have more of a robust discussion on the status of the policies overall, and then some of the challenges that are associated to making all of our policies public, but happy to continue the discussion.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Lindell?
No, that's good. I'll wait until we speak on the motion later on in the meeting. Thank you.
Great. Tony Thomas?
Just want to thank Martha for her presentation, but I think my concerns or questions were addressed by the other commissioners, so thank you very much.
And Martha, I just have one question for you. You mentioned bail as part of the recommendations, and that certainly involves police, but also would involve the Public Prosecution Service. Just wondering if you've had discussions with them around these issues as well.
Yeah, bail violations and arrests for bail violations. I mean, the bail process is a separate issue. And no, we have not had success with meeting with the Crowns about this.
Okay.
But we would always be willing to. Always.
Absolutely. And I think as folks have alluded to, we're going to have further discussion from a policy perspective, because one of the items in our work plan really does deal with a policy review, both the board policies and the HRP policies. So this is certainly something that will be important for us to consider as we undertake that review. I'll also just take the time to remind the commissioners that we haven't had anybody step forward to take ownership of that item in the work plan. So as we're having those discussions and thinking about this new information and what other information is out there, there is an opportunity for someone who has a particular interest to be the one leading that work and bringing it back to the commissioners. So Martha, thank you very much. Again, very informative, and I do appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come and meet with us today.
Thanks. I'm going to get back to my patients now. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Great. So next item on the agenda, number 9, information items brought forward. And Robin, I don't have any information items.
No,
Correct?
there are none.
Great. And then next up, our reports discussion for staff. So the first one is under the Wortley recommendations update. So just a reminder, before I turn it over to the two chiefs for their updates, you did have a document in your package today that does sort of give you an update on the progress of the initiatives in response to the Wortley recommendations, and again, response to a motion from the previous meeting. We've laid them out sort of as requested, each of the items listed with the responsibility, because I think it's important to point out that some of the items are the responsibility of the HRP and RCMP, where some of the other items do require input from other stakeholders, such as the Department of Justice. And there certainly was a discussion with HRP, RCMP, and DOJ around who owns what, and they did reach consensus on those items. So that information is before you today. Looking for one last point is that the detailed report of the progress on the recommendations according to the Wortley report is actually due in September. So I think the timing for that aligns very, very nicely with where we are today. So certainly at this point in time, just certainly soliciting any feedback from the commissioners about the format and of the document. I'll certainly deal with any of the format issues, and then we can certainly talk to, if there are questions to either of the chiefs about the content, we'll let them handle that. But any feedback that you have on the format, I'm happy to take now, or you can email it later when you've had a chance to look at it. So any comments or questions from a feedback from the format perspective? Carol.
I'm going to say thanks for this, because it's all these recommendations in one place. Makes it easier to look and see where things are. It's I realize that some of these actions or recommendations will be ongoing for a number of years, and that engaging some of the other partners in to fulfill some of these recommendations will take time. But it's just good to have this in a document that's easy to read and to look at and to be summarized like this. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Carol. Lisa.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I'm really enjoying the new format of this. This is exactly what I envisioned when we discussed it at the last meeting. It's just sort of a one-stop shopping portal where they're all listed, and you can just see the progress and who the go-to person is. So really do appreciate that. I do have a question though about data and public access to it. And
can I get you to hang on to that one?
Most definitely.
I'd like to deal with the format first, and then what I'll do is turn it over to the two chiefs to talk about any specific questions about the content, if you don't mind. That'll just help me keep it straight.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
I'll put her on hold. Thank you.
Tony Mancini.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, the format's what I was looking for exactly. I guess my only question is, when does my ask was to have this on both the HRP website and HRM website, so it's easy for the public to see it. So I'm just wondering where that is.
Yeah, and that's certainly still part of the plan, but I think we needed to agree on the format of the document first before we did that, so that what we're posting is a final version.
No, that's, I think it makes it easy. We always have to look at, that resident that's maybe easily to understand, easily to see where we are, and that was my intent. So I appreciate that work so far. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Lindell?
Good with the format. I'll save my comments for later.
Great. And Tony Thomas?
I think the format is fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, okay, that's great. So what I'll do at this point in time is turn it over to the two chiefs just for their regular verbal update. And then what we'll do is take some questions from a content perspective. I'll start with Chief Superintendent Gray.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Some of our updates in regards to community. So we do have our first ACE course set for post-COVID, October 19th to October 23rd. And so we're moving forward with that course. When it comes to our recruiting efforts during COVID, we had resorted to Zoom hiring sessions. So those were going on to ensure that in all of our communities, including our racialized communities, had access to recruiting efforts. We're backlogged because of COVID when it comes to our exams. However, we're working through that right now with the new stipulations. Depot is back and running at lower capacity, but it's still running. Also, as of July 6th, all of our front counters are open, which included our North Preston front counter. There was some questions prior in regards to North Preston closing, which it had not. However, just want to let everybody know that that was open again. There's nothing further in regards to the community level detachments. We're working with HRP in regards to the data and how we're going to, this goes to the date as well. So I know that we'll be dealing with that through some of the commissioners in the what date is going to be purged, what date is not going to be purged. However, we are stipulated, we do have that April 21 date that we're going to have to be fairly firm with, but again, happy to have those conversations to work out something. But when it comes to cleaning the data and how we're going to go about that, we're working with HRP on that. Also, we did hear back from Dr. Wortley, so the RCMP as well has agreed, and he has agreed for him to have further retention of our materials similar to HRP, so that's done. We have no ATIP requests yet for information for despite the communication plan, and all of the instructions were reposted in August through all of our socials in regards to access to that information. And DOJ has since reached out in regards to the research committee, so that's also on the spreadsheet. That was their responsibility, but obviously we're a partner in that, and the meeting will be set in late August or early September. And pending any questions, Chair, that's all I have.
So what I'll do is maybe I'll go to Chief Kinsella for his update, and then we'll take questions from the commissioners.
Thank you, Chair. And just in regards to data collection, so just reflecting back on the previous discussion that was just had earlier in this meeting, we will now hang on to that data until we get further information from the board. I know Councillor or Commissioner Smith is going to be doing some work on that, so we'll hang on to that data and then obviously wait for the board to give us some advice on what is the best way to continue our outreach to the community. We will continue to do that as well to ensure they know that they have the ability to ask for their information and then work with the group moving forward. As far as the street check ban, those are the recommendations in section 1. I think it's important to know that we don't access the information. It is there and waiting, the data. So we'll continue with that. And to the Chief Superintendent's point. There are some committees that need to be formed, some work that needs to be done. A multi-stakeholder approach is clearly required. And I know that we have a meeting with the DOJ and yourself, Chair, in September to try to sort some of those challenges out and the ownership pieces and see how we can collectively work to accomplish what we need to in regards to the recommendations. And the other piece that we've been focusing on of late with the community is the outreach in regards to our recruit program that we will be starting in 2021, incorporated new race-related testing up front, and that will be part of the new program and the new testing for applicants. And then obviously looking at creating additional training opportunities between our service and members of the community.
Thank you very much. So questions, I'll start with Carol.
I want you to know I need to be faster on the draw to unmute me. I'm going to get there. So thank you for both of those presentations. I, again, just want to say how happy I am that we have this these recommendations in the format we have them. And I'm wondering, Dan, if there's any way I might join the advisory committee that was recommended by Wortley. I know you had a list of members, and thank you for sending that along. And I wonder, just as a representative from the commission, if it would make sense to have me or another member of the commission sit on that committee as well, just for information and to be aware and to have a greater understanding of the progress.
So through you, Chair, thanks for the question. So just for clarity, Wortley speaks to a number of committees, whether it be research or community engagement or otherwise. Those committees have not yet been confirmed, but we need to have that multi-stakeholder conversation with the DOJ, et cetera. The committee that you're referring to and that I sent you the names of the members that you requested last meeting, that was a committee that was formed out of the apology on November 29th. Happy to have further discussion on what constitutes membership, that kind of thing. But that's the differentiation between the two sets of committees. I hope that's helpful.
It is helpful, and it probably also points to the fact that a number of different committees, it makes it harder to understand the role of each of them. But hopefully over the next little bit, we can have a conversation about the value of adding a commissioner to any of those committees, just to make sure we're engaged and part of any of the discussions.
Yeah, and I think that's a good recommendation, Carol. So I think if you and Dan have that conversation and looking at the terms of reference of the committee and the membership and sort of the documentation around that, I think that would be a good addition. Thanks. Any other questions, Carol? No, okay, Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my question is sort of more of a general question, I guess, about the data itself and the process, because I'm just following up on a news story that was out a couple of weeks ago about it costing $40,000 through the FOIPOP process for a group to get their hands on some data regarding the drunk tank and just how, just the data surrounding that. And I'm just wondering, what is the process that is involved, and just how is it that access to that data can cost $40,000?
So through you, Chair, to the Commissioner, So there's processes in regards to freedom of information requests, depending on the depth and breadth and request, how many years it goes back. I don't have all the information on that. I did read the article. My understanding it was data that went back for 5 years. Those are a number of factors that have to be considered. A lot of that information is physical work. It's not as easy as typing in and everything's automated and it comes back. So what happens is sometimes when FOIA pop requests come in, they're fairly straightforward, and it is part of the process in every instance, and I get them all the time. The question is how many hours is going to be required to pull this data? And depending on all of those factors that I just mentioned, amount of data, the breadth of it, the depth of it, how long we have to go back, there is hours that are tied to any request or any search. So in this particular case, the hours were assigned, as I understand. I'm not part of the process. Unless the request is for me, then there is a dollar amount that is applied to that for the people to do it. So as you can imagine, we get a number of requests. Some are, fairly quickly done. Some take a lot more effort and a lot more time. And I think that at the end of the day, for a lot of these requests, it does become a resource issue. And who is going to do the work? How are they going to do the work? Who is going to supervise the work? And keeping in mind that there is work going on every day, I think that we have to be reasonable in our ability to respond. And that is part of the process. So that's the information that was given to the particular individual, as I understand.
So when you say,
sorry, just Janice, I don't know if you were saying that you wanted to jump in from an ATIP perspective. Sorry, Lisa, I didn't mean to.
Okay.
So further to what Chief was saying, so within ATIP, the other add-on to that is vetting. So if it's personal information, it's free. If I'm asking for personal information through ATIP, and I'm pretty sure FOIA pop is the same, but I'll leave that to Chief. But if it's outside of personal information, so if it's an investigation or there's a statement or whatever people want, and generally speaking, any request that comes in through ATIP, on purpose, they make it very broad, of course, and the dates sometimes are all encompassing. So it takes into account the number of human hours to gather it, but then also to vet it. It has to be redacted appropriately to ensure that there's no implication on an investigation or on other personal information. So that's another, lengthy step, considering sometimes people are asking for years of information, and it's quite arduous, but there is a process. There is a formula when it comes to how much it costs outside of personal information, which I'm not privy to, but again, I just wanted to add that vetting piece, which is also a key component.
Okay. Just a quick follow-up. So when Chief Kinsella, when you say it's a physical process, you're talking about it like a staff member actually has to go to a filing cabinet and pull out, pieces of paper as opposed to a computerized scenario?
No, I'm not saying that at all, Commissioner. Through you, Chair. Our days of filing cabinets and file folders are pretty much behind us. But to the Chief Superintendent's point, when I say physical, somebody's got to do the work, right?
Okay.
Somebody has to physically do it. It doesn't happen through a virtual process or whatever else, people might be thinking. So we have to assign people. It takes hours, and the Chief Superintendent summed up the back end. So just the hours to pull 5 years of information or 10 years or 15 years of information, and then to go through the process of redacting, ensuring that we don't share anything that shouldn't be shared, we don't jeopardize investigations, we don't put anybody in a vulnerable position vis-a-vis public safety because they're either a witness or involved some other way in a case. And this specific request is, I don't know the ins and outs of the specific request. They very obviously do not come through me. They go through the FOIA pop process. But that I guess the point is, and I hope it's being taken, there is a level of work, a level of resources that are required. There's a time element, and somebody has to be assigned, and we have to make sure that we do it properly. And as the Chief Superintendent said, ensure that we follow all the processes that are required.
Gotcha. All right. Appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Great. Tony Mancini?
No questions for me. I'm good.
Lindell?
Thanks. Just to follow up on the question that Commissioner Blackburn asked. So if us as the police commission, this is in general, find that something is of interest to us, it could be the data that was being asked for when it comes to the lockup, or it could be the street check data, race-based data. When it comes to that, and we say we want 5, 10 years, whatever the amount of time is, how do we deal with the resources related to that? Is it the same? Obviously, we're not going to, as a commission, spend $40,000, but how do you address those type of issues if the commission asks for that same type of information? How do we go about that?
Through you, Chair. So, Commissioner, it would be a priority process, and we would have to prioritize the work. We would have to make other people available for, depending on the type of request, and people would have to be redeployed depending on the importance of the work and taken away from something they might otherwise be doing. We do that every day. Unfortunately, we have to, based on the resources that we have, and that's how we would address it. So, that's essentially, we would just have to prioritize and realign the work and try to meet the demands.
I think that happens at each meeting because there's a number of pieces of information that we're looking for from both chiefs, I think, in support of each meeting. So, I think that's important that, Dan and Janice both do an excellent job about responding to us when we do have questions and there's information that we need. But I think, we need to be cautious about, if we're going to be asking for information, that it would be for our purposes, and we certainly wouldn't want to be the intermediary for an external body or group that would be looking for information.
Right. So that was kind of the other pieces. We won't want people to use us as the commission to gather information that they can request, but also at the same time we have to understand, many groups, many people, individuals don't have $40,000 to spend on just gathering information for research. So the other piece is just getting an understanding of how much that, the monetary value of that information. That kind of gives us as a commission an idea of, okay, well, when we're asking for this information, there is a number that we don't see. Even when council asks for information, there's a number that we don't see. And this is, an indication of that. And yes, it's unfortunate that that is the number, but we realize that somebody has to do the work, and that's just the way it is. So hopefully we get to a place where we can make that type of information available in a way where it doesn't take many hours, and you can just press a button and it will populate itself. But we're not there yet, and I hope that we do get to that place. And as we go forward, maybe when we're speaking with the policy piece with Commissioner Blackburn later on, maybe there's a further discussion of and I think we've talked about this in the past, is our data, how we gather it, our tech, our IT, what that means, and I think that's an ongoing discussion on how we're gonna, I guess, future-proof ourselves when this information comes forward. So thank you for that. And I know it was a little off topic of the street check, but I think it's important when we're going forward, because there's going to be things that come out that are going to be related to asking for data. And before I move on, I seen the chief pop up. Do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, just if I could, Commissioner, and through you, Chair, thank you for the opportunity to comment. So, just to your point, just so it's not lost on anybody, we get data requests every day from the media, from the public, from councillors, and the vast majority of those are turned over very, very quickly because it goes back to, what's involved in the request. The one mentioned by Commissioner Blackburn was a much broader, much longer, much more in-depth request. But one thing that I would suggest, and there might be some benefit, I'll leave it to the chair and the commission to decide. We could put something together for you in regards to the freedom of information process, what's required, and it might be an opportunity to have a more robust discussion to see maybe how we can do things and you know, have an understanding of what is required. And it might help you know, add some clarity to the resource issue, because it sounds like some further discussion may be required.
I would suggest that we do that for an upcoming agenda, but also include somebody from the FOIPOP office as well. We just want to be cautious of, you know, Dan explaining a process that, you know, gets to him for the information, but may have to go through a number of steps before it gets to him. And I think the appropriate thing would be important too from the RCMP on their ATIP as well. So we'll note that for a future agenda item. Any other questions, Lindell?
Am I still okay? I'm still on. I'm thinking desperately, because I did have one, and that kind of took it off. I know it was related to something that Chief Gray mentioned around community strategy, or it might have been a community engagement strategy, but I didn't make a note of it, and it's gone. Maybe Chief.
I'll come back to you. Why don't you think about it? We'll come back to you. Okay. Tony Thomas? Tony's good. I did have one question, actually, Dan, for you. In reviewing the document, one of the stakeholders that I don't think we've talked about to this point in time is actually HRPA, which is the union. Just wondering, I'm trying to recall if we've received any information from the union specific to Wortley. I know I did have some discussions with them about it, but do we have anything from the union specifically on Wortley?
Through you, Chair, thanks. I don't have anything specifically from them, but I know that we have a MER, Management Employer Relations meeting coming up in September, so I can add that to the agenda to get their feedback. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I think what I'll do, leave it with me, and I think what I'll do is I'll follow up directly, just from a commission perspective, from the board's perspective, and ask the question, but thank you.
That would be great, thank you.
Marty, I see you've got, you wanted to add something?
Just very quickly, the what the FOIPOP people do with these requests normally, if it's very broad based and could be expensive, is they deal directly with the requester, and they narrow the focus of it. They go back and tell them, here's what we're looking at, here's a way, could you be more specific so we can reduce the cost and make it easier and focus it. So that's their practice, and I've seen that work very well. That's all.
Thanks, Marty. Lindell, I'm circling back to you if your memory was jogged. I'll put it out to you if it comes back to you later. Certainly jump in at that point in time.
I guess the Grays are catching up to me.
Seeing your moment.
You're too young for that, my friend. Too young for that.
Chair.
Okay. Oh yes. Sorry, Janice.
I'm sorry. Speaking of Grays, that was supposed to be funny. I don't know. Okay. I just wanted to follow up, Lindell, in that. So, did you want me to go over what the communication strategy was? Is that what you were looking for, or the community engagement was in relation to that? If not, then I missed it too.
So you mentioned in your, and it could have been that you mentioned that there was something being worked on, and I believe it was right after you spoke about the office in North Preston around the community engagement and what you're doing with the ongoing work. So not the planned work, but there was something that was in the process, and that's what I was wondering about.
And I think, so in relation to the communication strategy for Wortley or outside of that?
I don't remember exactly, but that's why I want to get clarification on what it was. Yeah.
Again, I don't want to take up too much time. Happy to side by that, Lindell, if you remember, and then let me know when I can follow up.
Nope, it's all good. All good. We're good. Thank you.
Great. Now I'm just going to go to the chat to see if there are any other questions. Nothing there. So that's great. Thank you very much. So what we'll do is update. There weren't any changes to the format. Everyone was good with the format. We'll talk about the sharing of that document via the website, and I will follow up with HRPA. And Lindell will let us know if his question comes back to him. And we're going to poke fun at you all the time now, Lindell, on that, just so you know. So the next item on the agenda is 10.2, which is the defunding the police. The motion that was made at the last meeting. Robin, do you have that motion there that you could read out? Or sorry, not the last meeting. It was the previous meeting. Do you have that motion there?
Yes, just 1 second. I'll put it in the chat.
Great, thank you. So
You cut out there, Natalie. You're on mute, my love.
I know I am. Thank you. People don't often say they can't hear me, so I knew something was wrong. So we're bringing the motion that Robin has put in there for me. So the motion was that the Halifax Board of Police Commissioners appoint an advisory committee to assist in adopting a definition of defunding the police, and that the committee present this definition at a future meeting of the board for further discussion and debate. Further, the definition of defunding the police should be based on the following: police performing policing functions, allocating appropriate resources to perform non-police functions, and investing in resources that have been proven to support community risks and promote crime prevention. So just before, actually, no, I'm going to let Marty speak first, because there were some questions from a process point of view around the discussion and what had happened and what the intent and the expectation was around the motion. So I'll let Marty speak to that. And then I did want to sort of have some discussion, sort of set the stage for some discussions and some specific questions of the commissioners. So Marty, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Natalie. The just as to where we are with this at the moment. Following the confusion we had, I went back and reviewed the tapes from the July meeting, and it's clear from those tapes that the motion was passed on the understanding that the issue of whether to have a committee or not was going to be discussed at a future meeting. Okay, that's not reflected in the minutes. That doesn't make any difference. So where we are in effect is that the board is here today to discuss, is here to debate and decide on Carol's motion that came forward on July 20th. That was the understanding. That's where we are. Okay? I think that's all I have to say now.
So Marty, if I understand it, we do have 3 options, I think. So would be to have that motion rescinded. If there is not agreement from the board that that is the right way to proceed, we do have the ability to accept the motion and continue with the motion as it was approved, or we do have the option to defer the motion again. Is that a fair summary?
No.
No. Perfect.
No. The motion was only approved on the understanding that it would be debated. The motion is not effective to appoint a committee, and therefore it doesn't need to be rescinded. The questions before the board today are effectively whether they want a committee. If they do, they will confirm Carol's motion. If they don't want a committee, they will not proceed with her motion, won't approve it. And the third option they have is to defer the matter again if they so choose. Those that I understand would be the 3 motion.
So we're starting as if Carol has just put the motion on the floor today. Correct?
Exactly, because that was the deal coming out of the July 20th meeting.
Okay, so just before I run through the order of speakers and get comments from the commissioners, I would just like to remind folks that this really is an important step for us to have this definition before we're making any recommendations to council or to the HRP or RCMP around what to do. I think we need to be really clear on what our objective is and ensure that if we're making any recommendations, if we're making any decisions, if we're, suggesting any actions, that those are aligned with what our sort of stated objectives would be. And that's where I see the definition is. I know folks have made comments in the past about, well, everybody knows what it is, and do we need any more discussion? And defunding really is a broad spectrum of everything from abolishing the police to, unlimited investments in programs that support public safety and safe and strong communities. So I think we do need to agree on what it is and what it means to us, and make sure that we're adhering to that principle as we move forward with any action plans. The idea of deferring it, certainly raises some issues about, there's time that we could be being proactive. There's time that we could be spending on talking about solutions versus, just being reactive and adopting what other jurisdictions have done or looking to other people for what we do. I think we need to have a pretty strong statement and a pretty good consensus as to what defunding really means. So, I had, put those questions out there, as already said, what do we want really to happen with this motion? If we're deferring, what is it that we're deferring for? I want to make sure that we, really put all of these things on the table and have a full discussion on it, because I think this is a critical piece for us as we go forward. So what I'll do, Carol, I'll start with you in the order of speakers for your comments. You there, Carol? Oh, there you go.
Thank you. I actually would like to make a comment now and then come back to make an additional comment towards the end. I just, I'm quite ready to make some definitive decision right now. But I just want to go back to the spirit of this motion is to have our board come up with a definition that we agree to, and that the definition be proposed by community members as opposed to HRM staff, which is kind of the way I saw that happening in that presentation. I have great respect for the presentation that we received on July 9th. I just felt that there were some community voices that needed to be included. So I keep reading this motion over and over. I will remind everybody that it was seconded and it was voted on unanimously. And I really think that the commission needs to have some definition for itself moving forward. Thank you. And I want to come back.
Great. Lisa?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, I wonder about the wording of this motion, and in particular, when it says based on the following, police performing police functions. Well, isn't the whole, this is just sort of starting a vicious circle, because isn't the whole point of the motion is to define what police function should be? So do you understand what I'm trying to say? It just, to me, if we send this out to a committee to decide, which, I guess on the surface I don't have a problem with, but, aren't we just sort of giving them, I don't know, just by saying police performing police functions, to me, I'm just hung up on that phrase for whatever reason, because to me, it sort of indicates a baked in definition of what police functions are, when in essence, what we're trying to do here is redefine what policing is all about. That's sort of my initial thoughts on this. And I guess the other question that I have is, what happens if, we put this out to a committee of the community, and they come back with a definition that just cannot work? or does not work for the chiefs. You know, when it comes to defining what is the, you know, what is the police service, what services police should provide, that is one question. But we have groups out there that want to say, no, abolish the police altogether. And I don't know if that's something that I can get behind, is abolishing. Can I get behind completely reimagining? Absolutely. But I just wonder, you know, what is in place if we get a definition that just cannot functionally work? And I throw that question out there. Thank you.
And I think the intent would be that it would be a recommendation. So it certainly is not something that we would be bound by whatever the committee came back with. With any recommendation, we can either accept it, we can reject it, or we could accept it with some modifications. So we wouldn't necessarily be obligated that, you know, that's what they said, so we can't do anything with that. So I think that's an important piece. And I think the police function piece, when I look at that, that really talks about, you know, the criminal code type things like murders, sexual assaults, etc., versus something like a wellness call, which there really is no criminal code sort of violation in that piece. So I think, you know, if I look back in the discussions that we've had, that was sort of what would be captured under that policing function piece. So by that same example, a street check would not be under there. I mean, they're prohibited now anyway, but there's no, you know, criminal code infraction that deals with a street check being required. Now, we know that regular and appropriate investigation would be required, but again, it's really honing in on those very sort of law related, for lack of a better term. I'm looking at my lawyer who's probably cringing there. Legal related, that's the word I'm looking for. Legal sort of, you know, infractions and those types of things, traffic that we've talked about, and speeding and whatnot, versus that community piece. So just for some clarity around that.
Yeah, and perhaps that's where you know, a reworking of the language might be in order, as you know, instead of saying police performing police functions, wording that in such a way that it, you know, it says specifically criminal code as opposed to community functions. You know, I don't know. I mean, to me, saying police performing police functions, that already assumes a certain definition, and that's what we're trying to do here, is define it, right?
Absolutely. And I think, again, that, you know, the recommendations that come forward would have to be consistent with the Police Act. I see that's been noted in the chat, and I think that's an important piece as well. We can't, you know, redefine completely what they do, because we are bound by legislation and sort of other pieces there that would need to be addressed as well. So again, I think, you know, a recommendation gives us that flexibility.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Tony Mancini.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to clarify, Commissioner McDougall said we all voted on and all agreed to the motion. We all voted on and agreed to have the discussion today, not to have a committee struck, just to clarify that. Where the original motion came that was amended by Commissioner McDougall created is still puzzling to me. And the response I got, it came from the clerk's office. Well, nobody in the clerk's office wrote this. I don't believe the commission should be involved in determining a definition. That shouldn't be coming from the Board of Police Commission. I'd be very curious for those that are advocating for defunding the police, you know, what their opinion is. They're even interested in creating a committee. I feel that Councillor Mason's motion, and I've been quite vocal on that, that's coming forward tomorrow, is detailed, and that's what we should be allowing to go with first. And when that comes back, that'll have tremendous amount of information. So I think Councillor Mason's motion tomorrow at Regional Council, a lot of this stuff is going to be determined by Regional Council, not the Board of Police Commission, because it deals with budgets and a variety of other things. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak to it today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Tony. Lindell?
Thanks. Just waiting for my computer to unmute. Good. Okay. So my feeling, and I've mentioned it in the past, is I understand the sentiment of needing a community voice in creating the definition of defunding. What I do support now is really, rather than us looking at the definition, it's really looking at what the overarching definition has been and what that is, and it was given in as our presentation by Derico Simons and Dr. Siciliano, which was reallocating money from the police and reinvesting into mental health support, education, social services, housing, prevention programs, anti-racist education, food security, and alternative policing. For me, how I envision this is the definition of defunding is pretty easy to determine, but it's as a commission and as HRM, what our goals and our values in our strategy, if we believe that the fundamentals of defunding, from what I just mentioned, is that's when we start getting into what this motion says. So really my point of view is having the core defunding this definition, which is already there, but then as we move forward, when we're looking at whatever council decides, whatever we decide as a commission.
We lost you, Lindell. You must have hit mute by mistake.
Yep, I hit spacebar by mistake. So I don't support this only because I really feel that we have a good working definition, and what we should be focusing on is if the commission is deciding if we want to actually do that or not. And then as we move further, if we say as a commission we want to focus on how we can defund, then we look at, okay, well, what is our focus going to be? Police performance, policy function, allocating appropriate resources to perform non-policing. That's where I'm at. And if we can get to a place of, if we want to decide to defund, then I think what we have here is a way to do that, and can be pieces of that puzzle. So that's where my head's at.
Okay, thanks, Lindell. Tony Thomas.
Yeah, it's a lot of good discussion going on here, and I'm paying attention to what everybody has to say. Tony Mancini makes some good points. Lisa, Lindell, Carol. To me, it'll be very interesting to hear or read about the council's decision and how they approach this. Defunding the police has a lot of different ideas and things that are coming into play. And I'm listening to other community members when they talk about defunding police and allocating resources. I think is one of the key things, but people get the wrong impression about defunding. When they talk about defunding, it's like eliminating the police totally, which was there's a lot of misunderstanding out there right now, and I think we need to hear a little bit more about our community members, what they have to say, with us who are sitting on the commission here, so we get a better idea of what the community wants and where they want to go with this. And I think, but at this point, like I say, I'm just really curious to hear what the commission or the councilors are going to be, HRM is going to be, how they're going to deal with this. And I think I'll have a better perspective at that point, exactly where I'd like to see the things going. So so that's my comments for now, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Tony. I guess I would just add a couple of things. I think Marty had made the suggestion that what we're really talking about is core policing functions, and I think that's a good word, sort of to add clarity around that. And again, I'm not saying whether we go for that motion or not, but I think that does help give a little bit more clarity around what the intent there was. With regard to Councillor Mason's motion that's going forward tomorrow, I would argue that this is exactly where we need to be vocal, and this is exactly the role of the Police Commission when it comes to civilian oversight and what our role is from a policy perspective in providing that advice to both chiefs. I think this is absolutely right, the best example I can think of so far, where we do need to make a stand. And I question whether us waiting for council to make a decision on this really does anything other than create further delay. I think we've had time, I think, all along to listen to an excellent presentation from Amy Siciliano and Dorico Simons, who do represent a large proportion, certainly, of people out there in the community through the work that they do. So I think really the time for us to act would be now. I think any further delay, frankly, from my point, very bluntly, if we're waiting for someone else to tell us what to do, is not a productive use of anybody's time. I think this is very well aligned with what our objectives are and the work that we should be doing. And as I've stated previously, we do need to have some framework and some clarity around what our objectives will be, as Lindell said, as we go forward and as we make plans and decide what we're going to do. We have to be consistent with that, because if someone, if Carol comes and says, well, I think we should get rid of 100 police officers, we need to be able to measure that against, okay, what is our stated purpose? What is our stated objective? Does that align with that? And now, Carol, I just threw that out there as an example, and yours was the first name I saw. So I'm certainly not saying that that's what Carol's advocating for, but it gives us that ability to, remind ourselves, if we're making recommendations, if there's actions that we like to see, are they aligned with what we have all agreed and have consensus on what defunding the police means? So I leave that out there. Carol, you had asked to have further comment, so I'll turn it over to you, and I'll ask folks if they did want to have other comment, just to use the chat, and we'll go through that way.
Thank you. So I've been reading over Councillor Mason's motion that will be discussed tomorrow, and the chair made a really good point that I firmly agree with, that the commission is the oversight body, and really in this situation needs a point of view, needs to agree on some position. I noticed that at the end of Councillor Mason's motion, thought is a plan and timeline for the creation of a set of recommendations for council, etc. The plan must provide for public engagement, consultation with the Board of Police Commissioners, and periodic check-in with council. So the point about consultation with the Board of Police Commissioners is really significant to me, because if we don't have a point of view about this and haven't really discussed it, then information is kind of all over the map as far as I can see. The question I have about this motion, which I think is really relevant and it's critical. Councillor Mason was in fact a commissioner for a number of years, and so there when I joined the commission, and I have utmost respect for him. And I think it makes sense that council do this. So it makes me question how long this report would take. A review of enforcement delivery role of police agencies and HRM, that could be 6 months, it could be a year. I don't think that this motion that he's bringing forward means that we should just step aside, not engage in and not have a point of view ourselves that we can support, and so that we go forward. Thank you.
Okay, so Lisa, I see you in the comments there. You wanted to propose an amendment to the motion?
If I could, just to tighten up the language a bit. In the main body of the motion, where it reads, assist in adopting a definition of defunding the police. After that, add consistent with the Police Act, and that the committee present this definition at a future meeting of the board. At least, and thank you, Mr. Dubé, for that suggestion. So I would ask that after defunding the police, the phrase "consistent with the Police Act" be added. And then in the bullet point, the first bullet point, instead of saying police performing policing functions, read police performing core functions.
So, yeah, I was just saying, Marty, process, man.
Well, as I hear what's being said, I think that that's a friendly amendment, but I would ask Carol if she's okay with that.
I'm absolutely okay with that.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Can
we get
Rob,
the motion, Natalie? Can we get the?
We're going to say the same thing. So yes, go ahead, Marty. Robin, can you get the folks to do that? Now, Janice has just put a comment there that the RCMP does not follow under the Police Act. So again, we have to be cautious of the fact that in HRM, we are policed by both HRP and RCMP. And it's important that both be included from whatever we go forward, because, you know, again, they're both covering HRM.
Okay, then. Yeah, all right, then. Then I'll strike that first one and then just go with the core functions, the amendment to that first bullet point.
Okay. So Simon, I know you're typing there. Do you want to just update that? Okay, so the motion reads that the Halifax Board of Police Commissioners appoint a community advisory committee to assist in adopting a definition of defunding the police, and that the committee present this definition at a future meeting of the board for further discussion and debate. Further, the definition of defunding the police should be based on the following: police performing core functions, allocating appropriate resources to perform non-police functions, and investing in resources that have been proven to support community risks and promote crime prevention.
Natalie,
yeah.
Natalie, it should say police performing core policing functions, not just core functions.
Okay. Simon, my friend, I'm going to get you to put that in the chat one more time with that change, just so that everyone has it there and can read it. Give you a second there. Okay, so the Halifax Board of Police Commissioners appoint a community advisory committee to assist in adopting a definition of defunding the police, and that the committee present this definition at a future meeting of the board for further discussion and debate. Further, the definition of defunding the police should be based on the following: police performing core policing functions, allocating appropriate resources to perform non-police functions, and investing in resources that have been proven to support community risks and promote crime prevention. So that is the motion. So we're starting from scratch. So someone going to make that motion?
No, Natalie, the
sorry,
motion,
Marty.
I think you already have the motion on the floor.
Yep.
You have
Okay.
the motion there. It was seconded by Commissioner Smith, and you've had your debate. So I think, and we've had it amended, and so we're dealing with, and it was a friendly amendment, so we're dealing with the amended motion. So.
Right. So Janice, do you have a question?
I'm sorry. Oh,
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just so I guess I'm clear in regards to the community group when it comes to, again, not to complicate things, but core policing duties. Who's going to decide? Like, is it the community group that's going to decide what core policing duties are?
No, I think that would be the direction that we would give to them around what our expectation of that is. And I think, as we've just discussed, it's really focusing on those, you know, and again, I'm not going to give it the best description here, but it's really focusing on things that are specific offenses, like, you know, the murders, the sexual assaults, the speeding, etc. Because when we contrast that with things like, as I mentioned previously, street checks, we contrast that with wellness checks,
Okay.
and those types of things, that we would give some, we wouldn't just give them the motion and allow them to do that. We would work with them to sort of help them understand where we're coming from and the parameters under which they would be working.
Okay, so respectfully, Chair,
Yeah.
is that a wellness check? Again, there's a very large education piece to that in regards to what a wellness check is. And I'll go back to, you know, the challenges that we have currently, even with what is a street check, right? We have a definition, but we also have a multitude of other community definitions of that phrase, right? That's kind of morphed into what we're experiencing now. So when it comes to core policing duties, that's a very broad and misinterpreted term. And I just want to ensure that both the chief and myself or whomever have an opportunity to, even as an education piece, to talk about that, because a wellness check, generally speaking, comes to us because there is a concern. There is, you know, so again, very, very broad understanding. And so I won't belabor that. I just think that that's an area that we can't simply define as core policing functions without there being more challenges. Thank you.
Yeah, and as I said, Janice, I'm not necessarily explaining it the best way, but I think, again, dealing with the fact that these would be recommendations and that we would have the chance to set the stage for that with this committee, I'm confident that we can address that. And certainly you, both chiefs, would be part of that in developing and presenting sort of that overview to the committee that we decide.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Tony Mancini.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question for the solicitor. If this motion was to pass, what is the process to create a committee?
Well, if the motion passed, then the board would be looking at someone to bring, would be looking at a further motion, right? A further motion to populate that committee.
No, just for the solicitor, if I may. So to understand the process, though, when we create committees council committees, there's a process that we follow. That it goes. The clerk's office has that process. They go out and engage. And so, are you saying the process is different because this is not a committee of council?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's in. Sorry, Marty. It's in the board. Is it not in the commission terms of reference? I'm sorry, I don't know the right document that talks about that we would follow the council process or other process as defined by the chair and the board. Is that not how it reads?
Well, it says it says that that you follow administrative order number 1, and basically subject to such modifications. So really what that does is bring it back to the board here to decide, you know, what kind of process do you want to populate this committee, right? That's the question, because it's not a standing committee of council, right?
Gotcha.
And so
you would have that debate.
What process to follow, we debate, and how do we determine who is invited? How do we determine, is there a process and a panel to determine who sits on it? Do people stick up their hand? Do we invite particular people? Can we do either of those or all of those, Barney? Just trying to understand that process that we're going
Well, I think you would be looking to someone on the board, you know, just come forward with a motion that would set that out, right? And then you would either accept that or you would change it as you felt was appropriate, right?
Yeah, and I think that's all really on the table at this point in time, because we could assign it to an existing committee if we wanted. There are a number of committees out there that may be appropriate to do this. We could look at striking up a separate committee with all new membership. We could do a number of different things with it. So I think that would be part of the discussion as to how we would go about setting that committee within those guidelines that Marty has discussed. So I think we've got all of those options are on the table right now. There's nothing that, you know, we wouldn't consider, but we would do what we normally do, have the debate and the discussion with the board, and then decide from there.
Thank you.
Carol, you have a question there? Curious to know if the Police Act could be a guide, since the BOPC is oversight to HRP and advisory to RCMP. I think the comment was that the RCMP is not subject to the Police Act, so we can't really use that as a guide. So I think in this situation where the board has oversight of the HRP and civilian oversight for HRP and it acts as an advisory to the RCMP, it would be most appropriate for the direction to come from the board. Just looking, I don't see any other questions or comments there. So we do have the motion in front of us. So as Marty has said, the motion was moved by Commissioner McDougall, seconded by Commissioner Smith. Commissioner McDougall is okay with the friendly amendment. So is there any further discussion before we take it to a vote? Not seeing any. Okay. Oh, Lindell?
Oh, my mic was on the whole time. So the question, I think Tony asked it before, but just to be clear, so if this fails, what happens? So do we then have to think about adopting another, if we want to, as a commission, adopting another definition? Do we just leave it and move forward? What are? Yeah, I'm just, because we don't have Carlos, so it could be, you know, could be a toss up of what happens here with this this motion. So what are our options afterwards? Just to be clear again.
Marty?
Okay, if the vote did not pass, right, then the commissioners would have the option of proposing another motion, a different motion, right, and voting on that. The commissioners could, after that, decide to defer the item again if you were worried about not having one of the commissioners present. So both of those are options, or the commissioners could just leave it and be the end of it for now, right? So those are your options. All
right, I'll, I guess, call for the question if there's no one else.
As the chair, thank you very much. I'll call for the question. Happy to hand it over to you, Lindell, if you want to be the chair. It's all yours, buddy. Okay, so we'll call for the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Against.
Any abstainers? Oh.
Can we have a count, please?
Yep. So all those in favor, let me just poll the members as we normally do. Carol? Sorry, Carol's in favor. Lisa, thumbs up or thumbs down?
I'm in favor of the motion as amended.
Tony Mancini?
Against.
All right. Lindell?
Against.
All right. Tony Thomas?
In favor.
Favor. And my vote would be in favor, so that motion passes. 4 yeses and 2 noes. So the motion is passed. So we'll have what I'll do prior to the next meeting so that we can agree on what the process will be and start some of the discussion early. I would invite everybody to send their ideas about the committee to me as soon as possible, and we can start putting that together, sharing that with the members so that we can have a really focused discussion and agreement at the next meeting on what that process will look like. So thank you to everybody for that, and we will move on to the next item on the agenda.
Super fast question. So
yeah,
would this be something that we discuss in public? Because now we're talking about creating a committee, or we're only talking about what the committee's work would be done. So what's the next step, and how does that happen at next meeting?
I think let me have a discussion with Marty about
Okay.
that.
right.
Still, everybody send me your ideas and your suggestions, and Marty and I and Carol will make sure we have that discussion so that we're clear from a process point of view before we actually come into the meeting window.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, next item on the agenda is Commissioner Blackburn's motion regarding public access to HRP policies via the website. So the motion that is in front of us is that the Halifax Regional Police and the RCMP, did we not amend that, Lisa, to the RCMP?
Yeah, I will put the motion on the floor, because the motion was just in particular that Halifax Regional Police make available to the public via the website their policies, their policies including but not limited to information on conduct of service members, conflict of interest, complaints, and use of force policies. I so move. So I intentionally did not mention RCMP with this motion, because I wanted to move this just for regional police to start, because I thought that might be probably faster. I'm thinking that by folding the RCMP into it, it would just take longer because just because the RCMP has more layers and it's national, that that would hold up the process. Most definitely, I want to see the RCMP do this as well, but I think that's something that has to be done on a national level. And although in the information sheet that was distributed, it makes mention of the policies posted online, similar to the Toronto Police Services Board, that really is not the best example. When going forth and looking how to do this, I really think that we should be looking at the Vancouver Police Service as a better example. They have their regulations and their procedural manuals online. Anything and everything that you can imagine is contained within those documents online. Everything from their policies regarding mental health to domestic violence to incident investigation, their arrests and detention policies, use of force, anything surrounding assault or obstruction of a police officer. So I really think, as we set about reforming how we make our policies available to the public, the Vancouver model is one that we should be looking at. I really think that if, as a service to the public needs to know and deserves to know what to expect in these situations when dealing with police. And so that's why I'm asking for your support to having these policies available on the website. And certainly, I ask Chief Superintendent Gray, is this something that the RCMP are considering at this point, and if so, at what process they are in this pursuit? Thank you.
So just before you speak, I wanted to get Marty to weigh in on this from a process point of view, Lisa, if you recall, because the question came from Lindell about how we had handled your motion versus how we had handled his motion. Mm-hmm. So Marty, do you want to speak from a process point of view, please?
Sure. Okay. So we're back in the same boat in some respects, right? This is a motion that's come forward, right? Under the rules, right? It would require a report, right, and a recommendation on it. And the motion would be deferred until that came back. But by the same token, the board has the option, right, by a 2/3 majority to suspend that rule and proceed to deal with it. Now, the only thing I'd add on this is that I know that the police have given some thought to this already. My understanding is that they have not, I don't believe they've prepared anything formally to address this in writing. But I know that they have thoughts on it, and I know that that the chief, I think, was prepared to say some things with respect to it. Those things, of course, could be prepared and put in a report to come back and deal with it, or alternatively, you know, the board could choose to suspend that rule and go ahead and deal with it based on what the chief has to say orally. So I think that's where we are with the motion. One thing or another that we can't just simply go ahead without making a decision on that at this point, right?
So do we want to hear from Dan first?
Yes, please.
Okay, Dan.
And on the basis of that, are we going to decide whether to suspend that rule? Is that plan? Or perhaps we should decide whether perhaps we should
decide whether to suspend the rule.
Yeah, we should decide whether we need a report or don't need a report. I think that needs to be decided.
Yeah.
Whether to suspend the rule or not.
So I think and Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong here, I think what we would want to do is to suspend the rule so that we can have some discussion about this, but we may still require the report as a result of the discussion. So suspending the rule is not about doing away with the report. It's just allowing us to have some discussion initially, and then still moving forward with the report if that's the way we want to go. Is that acceptable, Marty?
That's precisely right, but you'll need a motion, right, in order to, but you may decide you want to report anyway after that, yeah.
So that's rule 17, is that the motion?
Yes.
That we would be suspending rule 17 to allow for discussion of Lisa's motion at this point in time.
I certainly would like that. Thank you.
Lisa, are you making that motion?
I am making the motion that we are suspending Rule 17 in an effort to have the discussion.
Do I have a seconder?
Mancini seconded. Mancini seconded.
Seconded by Tony Mancini. Carol in favor? Or yay or nay? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Carol? Sorry, Carol, I can't hear you.
I am in favor. I, in fact, seconded it first.
Okay. Lisa, assuming you're a thumbs up. Tony Mancini, thumbs up.
For the motion.
Lindell?
For the motion.
Lindell, I can't see your thumb. It's up. Thank you. Tony Thomas, yours is up and mine is up as well. So that motion is, and no abstainers and no one opposing, or sorry. So we're good to go. Motion is passed. So over to Dan.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the Commission. So this is excellent dialogue, I think, and an opportunity. And one of the things since my arrival here, one of my key priorities has been to review our policies here at the HRP. We have some 1,700 pages in our manual, and it certainly is in need of modernization. And frankly, it does require an overhaul, and we have been doing that, actively doing that over the past year. A number of policies have been prioritized through that point, and we are continually updating those ones that are of a priority. Unfortunately, a number of the policy issues also require updating in more detail across the board, and that hasn't been kept up in years. So we're continuing to look at that. One of the things that I'd like to add for context is that for us to take our policy manual and put it online and make it open to the public, we would have to do a full review of that manual. All 1,700 pages, it would require some redacting before we can make it public. Certainly it would be resource intensive and would in fact take us away on the priority policies that we're dealing with now. However, certainly there's some dialogue to be had around that. What's the best strategy moving forward? How do we do it? That kind of thing. What I would suggest to the Commission for consideration is that it might be an opportunity, and I know Commissioner Blackburn mentioned some specific policies, use of force, those kind of things. it might be an opportunity for us to bring this back to the planning table with the BOPC and have some discussion around, what specifically is it that we're looking for, focus in on that. And one of the things that we have to be very cognizant of in any policy that we put on, keeping in mind that, policy is the why, procedure is the how. The why, certainly, people should be told on why we do the things we do. They should have access to that information. However, not all of the how should be available. It cannot be, just in regards to, some of it can, but not all of it can be. Just in regards to public and officer safety, deployment methods, it's just not going to be the regular everyday public that will access this document. It's going to be obviously made available, and I hear Vancouver put out as the example, and I believe they are. So I think it's something that we can have some dialogue, have some discussion. I think it would be important for the board to be actively involved in that as we move forward, and then ensuring that anything that we do put out for public consumption is appropriately protected, while at the same time informing our community on the why of things being done and where we can the how.
Thanks, Dan. Carol, comments, questions? Carol? Oh, there you go. Carol, can you hear me? Oh, okay.
Yes, I can. I wasn't aware that Vancouver had all of these online available, but I do agree that there are a number that we could be sharing, should be sharing, because the public will want to know, some of those basic policies. I do also appreciate what Dan has just said about some of the compromise ones. And at one point, I had worked with Carol Lee on a couple of policies and understand that there are many, many, many policies. It's not just a few that HRP has had over the years. And although it may be time for a review, it may also be time to put some of the ones that Lisa's started to focus on online so that the public can have access to those.
Thanks, Carol. Tony Mency.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I support the motion. I think transparency is utmost importance always, but even more so now for what's going on around the world, and putting the policies on websites so our citizens can have access to, I think makes perfect sense. We have to be sensitive to some of the things the Chief mentioned. I understand that. My question actually is, so if this motion, similar to the last question I had, the last motion, if this motion passes, what's the process? What happens next? If someone could clarify that for me, that'd be great.
So I'll jump in there, because if folks will recall, the policy review is part of the board's work plan. And as I mentioned earlier, we don't have anybody that's agreed to take that on. So I think that's the first thing that we need to decide, is somebody needs to step up and take on that review as part of the work plan. So I think when you do a policy review, and Carol started down this road with Carol Lee, and we've certainly had some discussions about it, is it's really prioritizing the policies, I think, is the first step in terms of, I don't imagine that we want to wait until Dan's reviewed all 1,700 pages. I think we want to be clear on prioritizing the policies as part of that and deciding which ones are most important. I know Lisa has some listed here, but as I understand, we haven't even confirmed that those are HRP policies at this point in time. So I think we would have to look at the inventory that's there, prioritize what those are, work with HRP, and I'm going to say and RCMP, because I think, again, we have to include both of them. And if the timelines diverge, then that's fine. But we have to remember the HRP is responsible. We're thinking about what's going on and, has happened since the George Floyd incidents. from a Black Lives Matter movement, the HRP is responsible for the largest Black communities in this province. So I think we do have to be consistent. If certainly the impetus is the current social justice environment, and now we're treating both HRP and RCMP the same. So I think, again, it's prioritizing, understanding what policies exist, prioritizing them, working with both organizations on updating where required, and then those updated policies would come back to the board for discussion, amendment, and then I think the decision at that point in time, whether there's a redaction that's required and whether that would be one that would be published. Okay, great. Lindell?
Oh, dear. My computer's being really slow. It's being really slow today. I support the motion and everything that's involved with it. There was something in the past that we chatted about, and I mentioned to the commission, and I was trying to find the link and I couldn't find it. But there are also some websites, and this might be in the future, but there are also some cities and I think there's one in Canada, but mostly in the States, that also put up information on complaints that come in related to officers. And I think it was at our strategic planning session when we were all together at the headquarters. I brought it up, and I know when we talked about it, our chiefs weren't too enthusiastic about doing that because really the logistics of trying to deal with it, not because they don't want people to know what complaints are happening. It was just logistics of trying to do that. So maybe that might be something to think about, just as a side note of, do we want to also make sure that we have transparency when it comes to complaints that are coming in, and whether it is identifying officers or if it's just these are the numbers of complaints that we have and this is what it was related to. But I think just to have that on the side, and then when this comes back, maybe once we know what we can put up and how that will look, broaden the scope of it. But I just wanted to make sure that was a side note as we think about what we're putting and making available to the public. But other than that, I support this, and that's it.
Okay, Tony Thomas.
Yes. I support the motion as well, Madam Chair. I also echo the comments made by Tony Mancini, and I think it's very important. Transparency is made to the public, and public has the opportunity to access any policy that they feel they want to know more about. And I think it's important for them to have a better understanding of the policies. So, when a question comes up to commissioners or myself, that they're readily, or we're ready to address any issues that do. So I definitely support this motion put forward. Thank you.
So thanks, Tony. Just a couple of comments before I turn it back over to Lisa, because she'd asked to make some closing thoughts. So again, this is part of the work plan. The policy review is part of the work plan, and I would propose sort of a friendly amendment that captures that we start that with, as part of the policy review in the work plan, Halifax Regional Police, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Look into that, because I think, again, it's something that we do have to spend some time on. I would also propose that we amend it to make it HRP and RCMP. Lisa, I take your comments about the timing, but I think, if we wait to address the RCMP later, then it's going to not necessarily get on their priority list. So I think if we include them both off the mark, there's certainly two streams for that, and they can be investigating and looking at that at the same time. But I think from a consistency point of view, I think it's absolutely critical that this does cover both HRP and RCMP. And I think to Lindell's point about the complaints, I think that may come up if there is a complaints policy internally that HRP uses, but I think if not, then I think that would be something that we would certainly look at from a future agenda perspective. So again, I would just propose a friendly amendment, Lisa, that would say, as part of the BOPC work plan covering policy review, that Halifax Regional Police and RCMP look at making available to the public via the website their policies. And I would say I would end it there, knowing that we certainly do have to take in consideration, the sensitivity potentially of some of the information, because as I understand, the VPD policies that are out there some of them are heavily redacted. So we just want to be cautious about, what information within the policy, certainly could, put investigation, et cetera, at risk.
Certainly, I would consider that a friendly amendment. Certainly, I would like to hear from Chief Superintendent Gray, just where the RCMP are with this type of, because I'm sure they've heard this request or have had this request in the past. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to that for a moment.
Janice.
Yes, of course, through you, Chair. Councillor Backroom, you're right. It is very complex for the RCMP. We have over 400 chapters just within our contract policing policy manual. So it is being considered nationally. So that is happening in the background. However, the timing of it certainly would, I would anticipate it being behind HRPs because of the size of it. We have, as stated before, some federal legislation that we have to adhere to in regards to what can be disclosed, what cannot be disclosed, what already might have some statutory prohibitions on it previously. So, and as well as nationally, all of our policy, all the policy holders would have to agree. Like just that in itself would be very complex. Again, from a transparency point of view, the RCMP is examining it. They're taking steps towards it. But again, the timing of it might be extended.
So just from the perspective of this motion today, Madam Chair, I have no problem adding RCMP with that friendly amendment, with the understanding that HRP won't wait for RCMP, but as you indicated, we'll have two different streams, and so that's fine. For me, this also too is about managing expectations. Just as just a couple final thoughts. This is, this is not something that's going to happen quickly, and it's about managing expectations. There are certain, as Chief points out, certainly the whys will definitely be contained with this information online, but the hows in many cases cannot. And even though I do point to the Vancouver example, they are very clear. The very first paragraph on their website says that the police regulations and procedure manual available to the general public via this website does not represent the entire regulations and procedurals manual, as a limited number of sections have been vetted to ensure confidentiality. So, absolutely, I agree that there are some things that just will not be able to be accessible by the public, and understanding that that this is definitely a process that will take some time, but would like to start with some of those key processes and procedures that I mentioned in the motion. If perhaps to start with that and then build upon it as we continue going along and as we continue updating our policies and procedures. Thank you. And you're on mute, Madam Chair.
I'm Lindell. So the wording of the motion with the proposed friendly amendments that the Halifax Regional Police and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, as part of the Board of Police Commissioners work plan covering policy review, make available to the public via the website their policies. I think I'm just cutting off that last part because we haven't confirmed that those are actual policies. If you just make that update, Simon, and just end it at their policies. Give Simon a chance to type that in so that we have it there, because my lawyer continually reminds me I need to have my motions up there. So Ken, so the motion is that the Halifax,
For his own protection.
and I want to protect him, that the Halifax Regional Police and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, as part of the Board of Police Commissioners work plan covering policy review, make available to the public via their website their policies. So Lisa, you've made the motion with the friendly amendment. Is there a seconder?
I second that, Mancini.
Okay, seconded by Tony Mancini. I'll poll individually for the question. Carol, thumbs up, thumbs down. Carol's a yes. Lisa, you're a yes. Tony Mancini,
I approve the motion.
you are a yes. Lindell is a yes. Tony Thomas is a yes, and I am a yes. So the motion is passed. Thank you very much, everybody. Just doing a time check. It is 3 o'clock, so we have another half an hour. Carol, 10.2.3 is the update on the policy on complaints against the chief. That one is with you and Catherine Salzman. I'll turn it over to you. And Carol, when you speak, when you sort of sit forward closer to the mic, you come across a lot clearer.
Okay. Right on top of it. So this policy is really for the board to be able to just outline how it will treat a complaint against the chief. And it's been an outstanding item from, I think when we first developed policies, and then we kind of looked at what we were required to have from the Police Act. And this was one of them, not necessarily the exact format of this, but we needed to have a process for how we handled the complaint, that sort of thing. So I want to thank Catherine for reviewing the original, which was much less complex than this, but this detail is actually far more accurate in the way we would deal with any complaint if there was one against the chief. And hopefully we can just pass this easily and support it.
Hey, Catherine, did you have anything to add before I ask if there's any questions from the commissioner?
I'll just add that it's not a full and complete outline of every step that we'd be following under the Police Act. If we did get a complaint against the chief, there are more details in the regulations, especially about the procedures that we'd have to follow. But this gives sort of a broad overview that so the public can understand stepping in sort of how the process is going to work and a starting point for the board as well.
Thank you, Catherine. Lisa Blackburn, any questions or comments?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Tony Mancini, questions or comments?
I'm good, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Lindell, any questions or comments? Tony Thomas? No, Tony's good. And none from my end as well. So do we require a motion, Robin, to accept the changes?
Hi, Madam Chair. Yes, I believe you do.
Okay, so Carol, did you want to make a motion and we'll have it placed in the chat?
So my motion would be that the Board of Police Commissioners accept the policy of receiving complaints against HRP Chief of Police dated as submitted today. The date is kind of important in this. And so hopefully there's a seconder.
So we'll just get Simon to put that in the chat for us. We have moved by Commissioner McDougall that the Board of Police Commissioners accept the policy of receiving complaints against the chief of police for the HRP as submitted on August 17th, 2020. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Lisa Blackburn.
Could we correct the spelling of my name? It's MC, not MAC.
We will fix the spelling of your name, Carol. So, Carol, thumbs up, thumbs down. Lisa? Tony Mancini? Tony's thumbs up. Lindell?
I'm good.
Lindell's good. Tony Thomas? Tony Thomas, you're good?
Yeah.
Yep, and as am I. So the motion is passed. Thank you very much, everybody. Next item on the agenda is the commissioner updates. The first one is the Management Employee Relations Committee, and there is no update as the meeting was canceled at the request of HRPA. Next item is the Canadian Association of Police Governance and the Nova Scotia Association of Police Governance updates. Carol.
So I bring commissioners up to date on the annual conference that's normally held by CAPG, usually at this time of year, actually, and would have been in Victoria, for obvious reasons. It's been going to be postponed, but it will now be held virtually on October 31st, November 1st, and planning either way for that. There's been a call for nominations or renominations, and as you know, I represent Nova Scotia on this national board, and our chair has signed a nomination form to have my name submitted for a second term, which would be for a 2-year term, and I'm happy to do that. The other member actually from Nova Scotia is Wayne Talbot from Truro. The Nova Scotia Association of Police Governance Board has been meeting virtually as when there was a plan for a workshop in September. That's all obviously been canceled, but some of the updates are continuing, and if there's anything that comes from that, I'll let you all know. Thank you. Any questions?
Questions for Carol? No? Okay, we'll move on to the chief updates. I'll start with Chief Superintendent Gray.
I'll limit my updates to, I'll say our HR fronts. We have a new inspector, Dave Nibbs, who's in charge of our the integrated CID section. So he arrived in July. He came from Alberta. Inspector Jeremy Landry is our new East Operational Officer. So he's based out of Cole Harbour, yet has the Eastern Shore, as well as some of our other support services. We have a new sergeant in charge of Muscat-Abbott Harbour last week, Aurelie Pelletier, and we also have a new corporal in charge of Preston Detachment, and he'll be starting in September, and his name is BJ Smith. Also wanted to let everybody know that our school resource officers who were deployed to our watches for COVID are now going back to their substantive roles for the reopening of schools in September. That's it.
Any questions for Chief Superintendent Gray? Seeing none, Chief Kinsella, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the Commission. We have recently returned our support officers back to regular duties as well. It will be a phased-in approach. We've returned CROs, which include our SLOs or SROs, back to each of the divisions. So we have 3 gone back to each of the divisions. And we have also returned our traffic unit back to full duty. So they are out and about enforcing all things related to traffic. We will continue to monitor as public health restrictions are easing and be mindful that we are going to proceed cautiously. The health and safety of our employees and citizens is obviously very important, and we'll continue to monitor the environment with the current state of emergency and the potential for a second wave, and I will continue to update the board as we go along. Our recruitment campaign for 2021 cadet class is ongoing. Yes, you is the slogan that we've been using. There's a lot of interest, and we continue to involve all of our partners from our diverse communities in our recruiting efforts, and we want our cadets obviously to be reflective of the communities that we serve. So lots of work going on in that area. And we've already had successful collaborations by offering information sessions through our partners platforms, including ISANS, YMCA, and the Mi'kmaq Friendship Center. These collaborations are helping us make meaningful connections and get the word out to get the best candidates possible. Please share this career opportunity with any of your own contacts and networks, and we are looking for people who are compassionate, community-minded, service-oriented, and reflective of the communities that we serve. We continue to have critical discussions underpinning the importance of trust, accountability, and obviously diversity in policing. On a different note, Deputy Chief Jim Butler has announced his retirement at the end of December of this year. So we wish Jim all the best in his future endeavors. He will be around for a little while before he takes his final leave. And mentioned earlier through Vice Chair McDougall, the advisory committee list has been passed around. You'll note that the co-chairs are Superintendent Dean Simmons and Trayvon Clayton from the community. Just a short note of recognition, you know, our members continue to perform excellent work that has led recently to several significant arrests. Just over the past several days and heading into last weekend, we had a very significant arrest in our West Division in regards to recovery of a stolen auto, recovery of stolen credit cards, and the arrest of 2 individuals. And last week, right near the end of the week, we had a very important robbery arrest in our Central Division that led to the clearance of several robberies and got a very dangerous offender off the street for now. And the investigative work continues, and over the weekend you may have noted that we made an arrest for an 18-year-old in relation to a shooting that occurred in Dartmouth just the previous Friday. He ended up turning himself into police headquarters, and that was through the negotiation and excellent work by investigators and our patrol units. So my thanks to all of our members who are doing great work out there day in, day out, and subject to any questions, that's my report.
Tony Mancini.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chief. First of all, Jim Butler, thank you, Jim, for his service. That's amazing, a long, great career, and truly appreciate it. Glad to hear, Chief, the CROs and SROs are coming back. The traffic unit, I saw them out in well force leading up to the McKay Bridge there last week. I think I counted 5 vehicles and bikes and people being pulled over, and that was fantastic. So really happy, Chief, that they're back. You know, and you alluded to some of the arrests that have happened recently. You know, there has been, to my knowledge, and you can clarify this for me, Chief, you know, an increase in the number of violent crimes in the last, over the last month. I mean, shootings and stabbings, and this is something we would see 5 years ago, but we hadn't seen it in a long time to this number, along with robberies and those types of things. So, which is rather concerning, and unfortunately, it's almost a daily occurrence that we're hearing about something like this. Do you have any indication of why there's an increase? I mean, I personally had a concern because of COVID-19 that we might see this when people become, you know, when things are desperate, people make desperate decisions. And so, any indication why the numbers have increased?
Thank you, Commissioner, for the question, and through you, Chair. So one thing I'd like to just open up with and say is any shooting, one shooting or one stabbing is one shooting or one stabbing too many. So I can tell you that our patrol units work very hard in their responses, getting there very quickly. And that's why I highlighted the arrests that were made over the last several days. these go on all the time, and they're always quickly responded. I'd also like to highlight the great work that's being done by our Criminal Investigation Division, and it's an integrated unit, as you know, with the RCMP. So we are regularly working together to analyze trends, keep track of where the shootings are occurring, where the stabbings are occurring, and getting to them as quickly as we can. Anytime there's any patterns, we're certainly on it. And I mentioned the clearance of other robberies, not just related to the one that occurred last Thursday. As far as the why, there's many reasons I think that are at play here. And the analysts that we have employed continually do great work to try to figure out why things are happening the way they are. To your point about COVID, perhaps as we, kind of fully open and or get to that point where perhaps we're, getting to that area, we've seen great increase in pedestrian traffic downtown. The bars are open, many more vehicles on the street, our parks are full, all those kind of things. So I don't have an exact answer for you on the why, but we'll certainly monitor. The men and women of the Halifax Regional Police and the RCMP are doing a great job trying to stay on top of things, using predictive policing where we can, and we'll continue to do that and bring people to the appropriate mechanism through apprehension or otherwise. So,
a follow-up question, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes.
With regard to the CROs, Chief, the school resource officers, will they all be in place by the time school starts up in September?
So certainly we're going to, and through you, Madam Chair, certainly we're going to monitor. While we're in the state of emergency, I think we have to be, cautious on how we move forward. When is the Atlantic bubble going to open up? So we're paying attention to all those things. And I've said it many times, and I know you agree, Commissioner, we just have to be cautious and ensure that we have the members that are as protected as we can on the front line to respond to those 911 calls and all those frontline work, while we ensure also that we provide our support work that the citizens here in Halifax and HRM have come to rely on. So we'll continue to work on it. We're just waiting to see how it goes with the schools, and we'll make sure that we have resources in place as best we can on a priority basis. Obviously, that's always the discussion, to make sure that we're responding appropriately.
So when the second wave hits us, when it comes to COVID, as we anticipate, as the public health folks are telling us, it's possible that once again CROs and traffic authority may move back to patrol. That's a possibility. Is that correct?
Well, through you, Madam Chair, and to you, Commissioner, I think we always have to evaluate, right? One of the things that we did as we headed into the pandemic, schools closed. There wasn't, a great need to have school officers there. Communities began to shut down. There wasn't a lot of people out and about. We were focused in on the front line. We're aware and very, supportive of having CROs, SROs in the community. We just have to evaluate it in light of the overall picture and our response to everything else that's going on. So we'll continue to do that. And with any luck, the second wave isn't, going to be what they predict. And the sooner we can get back to regular business, the better for us.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. Chief Superintendent Gray, just wondering if you wanted to comment on that from the RCMP perspective as well, just in terms of anything that you're seeing for trends, what the plan is for the CRO officers in terms of timing, and what the impact may be if there is a second wave.
The plan for the SROs are, as soon as school goes back in, to be back in their substantive roles. We have a bit of a process when it comes to how we can reschedule. We have to take, time to get them back on their regular schedule. However, we don't really know what school is going to look like. So we're sensitive to that in regards to what their role physically will be. I'll just agree with everything that the chief said in regards to how we manage trends. We look at our trends monthly, yearly, quarterly, and utilize ComStat in regards to how we deploy. So when it comes to an increase in statistics or increase in crime, I think it's important to look at it from a global or a bigger picture as opposed to how it appears. And I think that having a very relatively low crime rate over the last 4 months, seeing now, violent crime, it lends itself to a perception that it's a lot. So I just think that we need to be careful and look at the actual numbers and how that's being interpreted, because everything has a context. And the last piece was, just anticipating COVID. Again, we don't know what that's going to look like. What we do know is just just from our experience, how to prepare our members, and they've done an amazing job at reacting to COVID and maintaining their duties. So we'll just keep working on that and trying to anticipate at least with the impact that it's going to have on our membership.
Great. Lindell, did you have any questions for the Chiefs? No. Tony Thomas, any questions for the Chiefs? I can't see Tony Thomas.
Nothing at this time, Chair.
Great, thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's great. So no added items at this point in time to discuss. Any items for future consideration? Any topics that board members would like to see at a future meeting? I know we talked about a number of things today around FOIPOP and ATIP processes, talking about getting ideas about the committee for defining the definition of police. That will solicit that, and looking for someone to step up and take responsibility for the policy review as part of the work plan as well. Any other items from commissioners? Seeing none, before we move in camera, would just like to ask if there are no updates or changes to the in-camera minutes, that someone could move for the approval of those minutes from the in-camera meeting of July 20th.
Madam Chair, I'll move those in-camera minutes.
Moved by Lisa Blackburn, seconded by Carol McDougall. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? I don't see any opposed, so the motion is passed. So we'll also need a motion to move in camera.
Madam Chair, just a quick question, a technical question, I guess. I noticed that our in-camera session in our calendars was only from 1 until 1:30, and I'm just wondering, if we still good with Microsoft Teams if we move into that room now?
Oh, let me just look at my calendar. Robin, good question. Are we able to?
I'm just checking here. Yes, we can still join the meeting. It's out of your calendar now, if you were looking at Outlook, it would be out of your calendar. But if you go into your actual calendar section and then open it from there, you can get into it from there.
Okay. So we'll just need a motion to go in camera. Moved by Carol McDougall, seconded by Lindell. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No? Okay, so just reminding folks to leave this meeting and then to join the in-camera invite. Thank you. Robin, am I live? I am live now. So we're back in the public session of the Board of Police Commissioners meeting. So
Natalie, just 1 second. I just want to make sure that we have quorum. I believe we're missing Commissioner McDougall.
Okay.
I'm just waiting to get her back in the meeting.
Thank you.
I see her.
And there's Carol. So we're back into the public portion of the meeting. So no notices of motion. Next item on the agenda.
Sorry to interrupt, Natalie. Carol is not in the meeting. That's just the notification that I'm calling her.
I see her.
You can see her face?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I cannot. Anyway, you can continue then.
No problem. So we're back in the public portion of the meeting. The next item on the agenda was notices of motion, and there are no notices of motion that were brought forward. Reminder that the date of the next meeting is September the 21st, 2020. And beyond that, if there's nothing else for today's meeting, then the meeting is adjourned. And I thank everybody for participating. Take care. Bye-bye.